Hello and welcome to a very special edition of Talking Honey, where we are celebrating Queen Elizabeth in the year of Her Majesty's historic Platinum Jubilee. I'm Shelly Horton and with me is Victoria Arbiter, who spent her late teenage years living inside Kensington Palace, former Editor-in-Chief of the Australian Women's Weekly, Deborah Thomas, and 9Honey's royal reporter, Natalie Oliveri. Welcome, ladies.
Hi. Thank you.
Hello.
Well, Queen Elizabeth is Britain's most widely travelled monarch and has visited Australia 16 times. In 1954, the Queen made history by becoming the first ever reigning monarch to set foot on our shores in what would mark the beginning of a very special relationship spanning more than half a century. Victoria, I'm going to start with you. So while she was heir to the throne, Princess Elizabeth was en route to Australia when news came through that her father had died. How did that change her plans?
Well, massively, to sum it up in a word. You know, in October 1951, she had travelled to Canada with Prince Philip on behalf of her father. His health was declining, and so it was thought sensible that he stay home and convalesce. That trip was such an enormous success that they said, this is going to work. Let's try Australia and New Zealand. So in January 31st, Princess Elizabeth and Prince Philip were waved off at London Airport. And I don't think they ever would have set off for a trip of this magnitude had the King's health been thought to be as bad as it apparently was. So anyway, of course, air travel not being what it is today, they were en route to Australia, but they made a stop, first of all, in Kenya. And it was while they were in Kenya that the news came. But ironically, the Queen was one of the very last people in the world to know of her father's passing. Prince Philip broke the news to his wife, and suddenly plans for the onward journey were abandoned. But I thought what was really quite special was the Queen had asked that when she left Treetops, or when she left Kenya, that the accompanying press wouldn't take her photograph. She didn't want that moment captured. And imagine the press today complying with such a wish.
Wouldn't happen.
But they did. And after a very long journey home, the Queen arrived back in London on February 7th to a nation in mourning. So Australia had to wait.
That's right. But she did make good on her promise to visit Australia and arrived in Australia at Sydney Harbour on February 3, 1954. So let's hear from the Queen moments after stepping off the royal barge at Farm Cove.
I am proud indeed to be at the head of a nation that has achieved so much. Standing at last on Australian soil, on this spot that is the birthplace of the nation, I want to tell you all how happy I am to be amongst you and how much I look forward to my journey through Australia.
Deb, the Queen was just 28 years old. She looked so young there. How did Australia respond to such a young monarch?
Oh, Australia could not get enough of the Queen. And you have to think about it in the context of that time. You know, they were the days where all the schools started the morning singing the national anthem, turning to the Queen. You went to the movies, you stood up for the national anthem. So she was really a combination of a revered royal, almost godlike figure in many ways, movie star glamour and rock star, essentially, the biggest celebrity that had ever arrived on our shores. And over 70% of people turned out to see her, and she was extraordinary. She went to every state, every territory. She travelled by car around 2,000 miles. She took 33 flights. She made sure that she saw everybody. But the glamour and this whole fairy tale and her being so young was just Australians could not get enough.
I love it. Now, this was very much a tour to introduce the new Queen to her people. Now, Nat, you were actually on the Prince Harry and Meghan's royal tour in 2018, and you recently covered Princess Anne's visit to Sydney. So how was the Queen's visit back then different to the royal tours now?
So different, Shelley. I mean, as Deb said, it was huge. 58 days. That's 8 weeks. Now, in comparison, when Prince Harry and Meghan came to Australia in 2018, their tour was described as being mammoth. But it was just 16 days, right?
Wow.
So you can see the difference there. The Queen's tour was basically an introduction of the Queen to her new people in Australia. So they went everywhere. One of the places they went in particular that I remember hearing about, because my great-grandfather got to meet the Queen in the Blue Mountains because the royal train travelled there. So that's the thing, they had a royal train in Australia and we don't have that anymore. You know, she was really going everywhere, doing all the touristy things as well. We've seen pictures of the Queen at Bondi Beach. I mean, how could you not go to Bondi Beach? And all these places, you know, they went to the Outback, they did the, you know, the Flying Doctor School of the Air thing that Princess Diana did when she came here. So it was really the foundation, I guess, for other royal tours to come, but very much a busy one. And if you couldn't watch it on TV, if you didn't have a TV, you could go to the cinema and watch it there. So it's pretty incredible. I mean, now you can't really go to the movies to see the Queen unless it's the film, The Queen.
That's
so
right.
very different.
Well, the Queen and Prince Philip returned in 1970 with their children, Prince Charles and Princess Anne. Now, Victoria, it was during this visit that the Queen helped to break new ground in how royalty would interact with their subjects. What was happening?
Well, as you correctly mentioned, the Queen has been to Australia 16 times, and normally for big milestone occasions, the bicentennial, the Commonwealth Games, that kind of thing. But the visit in 1963 had been considered a little lacklustre, and so aides were charged with jazzing things up a bit. How could they make the Queen more accessible to the masses? They were going to New Zealand as well, so Sir William Heseltine, he was the private secretary, the Queen's private secretary at the time, the only Australian to hold the position, and he was the one put in charge. He was the jazz master. So he spoke to authorities in New Zealand and said, what are your thoughts? What can we do? And they came up with this idea that the Queen would perhaps alight from her car 60 or so feet ahead of the destination, and then she'd walk amongst the masses and she'd meet the regular people, not just wave and offer a handshake to dignitaries. Things went quite well in New Zealand. The police weren't terribly keen on the idea, but the Queen and Prince Philip were really game for this idea, the walkabout. Anyway, they come to Sydney, and the crowds are massive in Sydney, and the press is a real scrum. And Sir William Heseltine later recalled it in his memoir that it was not altogether without pain. And I think the reason he said this was right as he was sort of trying to wrangle Prince Philip, who the press alleged had said a Greek word, a rude word to a member of the crowd, which Prince Philip swore that he didn't. Right as that was happening, Princess Anne was overheard complaining about the bloody wind. And there were a lot of old-fashioned Australians in the crowd who were horrified that a member of the royal family might use such a word. So Sir William Heseltine said that, you know, the jury was out on Prince Philip. He said, unfortunately, with Anne, there was no mistaking what he said. But having said that, the walkabout, as it became known, was a huge success. It wasn't the first time they'd mingled with the crowds, but it was the first time it was done in such an orchestrated fashion. And when they returned to the UK, the Queen conducted her first walkabout in Coventry, and it's really been an integral part of royal life ever since.
Oh, so we're going to claim that. Definitely. Now, the thing is, the Queen's relationship with Australia hasn't always been smooth sailing. In 1975, the Whitlam government was dismissed by the Governor-General in a decision we now know the Queen was not informed of in advance. Deb, how much damage did this cause to the Queen here at the time?
A lot of damage. I think many Australians, whether you were a monarchist or a Republican, were shocked that the Queen had the power to do this. The fact is that, you know, the Queen was very popular, but it was starting to, times were changing. The whole Whitlam kind of anthem was around, it's time for a change. And Australians were looking at the part that she played as head of state and, you know, Republican murmurs. And then when this happened, I mean, Gough Whitlam was an elected Prime Minister, and Sir John Kerr to come in and sack him, people suddenly thought, hang on a minute, I thought the Queen was never supposed to meddle in politics to this extent. And there was a real fallout from that, and I think that a lot of people started to question, who hadn't questioned, our place as part of the Commonwealth with a head of state in the UK.
Interesting. Now, Natalie, year 2000, the Queen visited again following a referendum the year before. But in this case, the majority of Australians had voted to keep her as head of state. And in 2002, Prince Philip made his now infamous gaffe about Indigenous Australians and throwing spears. Oh dear. So it shows royal tours really can be fraught with challenges, can't they?
They can. I mean, as we were just talking about, they're so busy and the royals are coming from England, so there's the time zone difference. They're jet lagged and the heat in Australia is very different. Victoria, I'm sure you know. And, you know, they have to keep calm. They have to look interested at all times. They have to meet people they may not necessarily want to meet, but that's just part of the job. But look, yes, when the Queen came in 2002, the referendum had happened and Australians had voted to keep Her Majesty as head of state. So it was good news for her. But look, as you said, Prince Philip's gaffes, they had become such a big part of his time on royal tours because, you know, he had to stand behind the Queen. So he tried to make it his own, and making these comments, they sort of gave him a bit of a reputation. But with the Aboriginal Australian thing, he said he asked them whether they still threw spears at each other, and that got Prince Philip in a lot of hot water. But they later said that they thought he was being a bit of a larrikin and that they took no offence.
Yeah.
But look, it's funny though, like the royals also have to deal with anti-monarchy sentiments, and Prince William and Kate are dealing with that at the moment. They've just come back from the Caribbean and a number of countries there are wanting to dump the Queen and make a republic. So they also have to face that while on royal tour as well, because not everyone loves the royal family. I mean, we do, but, you know, we're not the whole population.
Interesting. So in 2011, the Queen made what would be her final visit to Australia. And at the end of that tour, she gave a speech at Chogam, quoting an Aboriginal proverb that many interpreted as Her Majesty's final farewell to a country she had such affinity for. Let's take a look.
I have had the good fortune, together with Prince Philip, to attend many Chogams over many years. Their importance has always been in precise relationship to their relevance, always being attuned to the issues of the day, and always looking to the future with a sense of vision and practical action to match. I conclude with an Aboriginal proverb, which is itself enduring. We are all visitors to this time, this place. We are just passing through. Our purpose here is to observe, to learn, to grow, to love, and then we return home.
I love that. Victoria, that visit was in 2011 and was dubbed by many as the Queen's farewell tour. Despite the Queen's age at the time, is it surprising that she and Prince Philip had such a full itinerary still?
I think if it were anybody else, it would be surprising, but because it was them, no, not at all. They never sat down, I think, even for a second. And actually just hearing that, it's really moving to hear her talking in that way. I've got goosebumps. She's a remarkable figure, always has been. And I think it really speaks to her sense of duty that they came, she was 85, Prince Philip was 90 at the time. And when I say jam-packed schedule, I'm talking from morning till night. You know, the younger royals, they'll often put in a night off or a day off. Or there'll be time with their children that's kind of masking as
that
time
younger
off.
generation, they just don't work like the others do.
And they kind of don't. You know, we're adapting to this modern society, but the Queen and Prince Philip, they were Canberra, Brisbane, Melbourne, Perth, and the aides travelling with them said that they conducted a schedule that anyone half their age couldn't have kept up with. They're sort of like the Energizer bunnies of the royal family. They go and go and go. But I thought it was really nice that the visit was timed to coincide with Chogam that was happening in Perth. And the reason it was particularly poignant was because the changes in the laws to succession had been sort of pushed through and they were approved then. Of course, Julia Gillard was there as your first female Prime Minister. And the Queen, I wanted to read you this because she has to be so careful. She's not allowed to express an opinion, but as we saw in that short clip, she is masterful at getting across an opinion while not getting across an opinion. You know, and so that particularly year, the theme was women as agents of change. And as she was opening, she said, it reminds us of the potential in our societies that is yet to be fully unlocked, and it encourages us to find ways to allow girls and women to play their full part. And that on the heels of the changes in the laws to succession, which means that Charlotte's position can't be set aside for Louis. You know, heaven forbid that George be unable to fulfil his future role as king. And so I think really the Queen is a testament to her generation, and the way she conducts herself is extraordinary.
So I'm going to put this final question to all three of you. The Queen, as head of the government of the Commonwealth, has always made it very clear how important Australia is to the monarchy. Now, we've seen this relationship continue with all of her visits with her family, but as the crown is set to pass from the Queen to Charles, Natalie, I'll start with you. Do you think there will be more talk of Australia becoming a republic?
Unfortunately, yes. I mean, there already is talk about this and the Queen hasn't even passed yet. But look, I think it's a shame because Prince Charles is going to make a great king. And I think younger Australians in particular really need to give him a chance. He's going to be much more fun than the Queen because he's been in the job for so long, waiting on the sidelines. He's more relaxed. Of course, he's going to be incredibly dedicated to duty. But look, you see him interacting with the media. Compared to Harry and William, Prince Charles is way more exciting. William and Harry are boring, okay?
Controversial opinion.
Prince Charles wants to have a bit of fun. You know, he's been around the bush. He's seen it all. And I think if younger Australians gave him a chance, the talk of us becoming a republic wouldn't be as loud, I think.
Do you agree, Deb?
Not really, no. I think that, you know, everybody now looks at the Queen and just admires what she has done over the last 75 years. As a human being dedicated to a role, she has played pretty well most of the time perfectly. And I think there's a lot of young people say to me, wow, wouldn't it be great if we could just skip Charles and go straight to William? And I explain that that is not possible. We have what is called the divine right of kings, and there is a lineage there. But I think that when the Queen passes, there will be a huge sort of cry for a republic because Australians really admire the Queen, what she's done, and they're probably not so sure about Charles. And we know that William doesn't really want that role, or he said that. Maybe he's changing now, and you probably have a better idea about that. But I think that there's an element of he will not be his grandmother. And what his grandmother did is extraordinary, and I think most people would recognise that.
Victoria, does it hurt your heart a little bit too?
I don't you know, but I think I kind of fall somewhere in the middle because I think Deb's absolutely right. In terms of the global view of the Queen, she is untouchable. She can do no wrong. She is absolutely brilliant. No one will ever replicate what she's done. But I think that's right too in terms of if people will just give Charles a chance. We live in this terribly ageist society and everyone wants the youth and the glamour. But with the youth and the glamour, you don't have the experience. You don't have the same level of wisdom. It will come. But Charles is the longest serving heir apparent in history. I've always thought it must be mind-boggling to think you only inherit the role that you're destined for upon the death of a parent, which is incredibly traumatic. But I think sympathy for Charles over the loss of his mother, if you remember his face during the funeral procession for Prince Philip, the man was devastated. So I think Charles has got a lot to offer. I hope people will give him a chance because what he's done through the Prince's Trust, what he's done for young people all over the world is extraordinary. People don't talk about that because they focus on the soap opera. So I like to think, Charles, just give him a chance.
Give him a chance, Deb.
Just quickly, I'm just going to say it's Charles and Camilla.
I know.
And maybe there may be a slight issue around that. We haven't got time for it now, but that's the whole question.
There's a little part of me that goes, I think she'd be a bit controversial and a bit more fun as well.
She's going to be great. And the Queen's already given her the tick of
approval. There'll be a lot of people
Yeah.
who won't accept her, I
That's
think.
true, but that's part of the fun of it. Okay, thank you so much, ladies. Please thank our experts, Victoria, Deb and Natalie, for their insights. And if you would like some more royal news, visit 9honey.com.au.